Hi, welcome back. Leo, Mel, Laura, how you doing? Right, we'll just wait for Safia to join us. Hi, Safia.
I'm back. Hi.
So, do you have some questions for our guests?
Sorry, we can't hear you on the stream.
Okay, I think I fixed that, so they should be able to hear me okay now.
No, it's still.
It should be okay, I think. Yeah, there's a bit of a delay. So, as I was saying, thank you to our wonderful guests. This is the last Q&A, so make sure you get those questions in. So, Safia, do you have some questions for our guests?
Yes, I do. So the first question I have is for Laura. So it's a question around escape rooms. So someone is asking, how did you get involved with his escape room, and what are the considerations / design constraints that one has to think about designing an escape room for a tiny room?
Sure. So I got into escape rooms. It was through the world of ARGs, basically. And speaking of small worlds, this is extremely relevant. When we first moved to Portland, we met up with some people from the ARG forums that we were a part of that we had never met before in real life. But they were like, we're your new friends. They introduced us to a puzzle night called Puzzled Pint, which is obviously like not running right now with the pandemic and stuff, but they're still releasing puzzles for free on the second Tuesday of every month. So if you're interested in puzzles, check that out. It wasn't until I started doing Puzzled Pint that I really started thinking of myself as a puzzle person, I guess. But our, eventual competitive puzzle solving group went and did an escape room, one of the first ones that opened in the US. And on the drive back, we were like, well, we're all video game and theater and narrative and story people. Like, how hard could it be to sort of do this? That was in late 2013, and we opened in 2014. It's very hard, actually, of course, so much harder than we thought. But that's how I kind of got into that. And as far as design constraints, it has a lot of overlap with video game level design. You're ushering people through a space in a sort of narrative way. You're directing their attention to the right things at the right time using lighting and sound and that kind of thing. But I actually take a lot of inspiration from garden design, which is the same sort of principle, where if you have a large space that you divide up into smaller areas, it feels much bigger. You want to put a fountain just around the corner so that the sound of the water like lures you around. There's sort of winding paths. You're setting up little vignettes and viewpoints. So I think there's a lot to learn in terms of the extremely small space design from the way that people do exterior garden design.
That's awesome. I'm going to continue to watch Garden's World and catch up with Monty.
Yes.
So it makes sense now. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, Small Spaces, Big Dreams is his show about doing garden design.
Nice.
Very inspiring. Yeah.
I have to check that out.
Well, that was fascinating. I would have never guessed about garden design. So thanks. So now I have a question for Leo and Mel. So the question is, how are you working around COVID? Did you or do you have thoughts about making any of your theater work digital?
Yeah, so I guess the digital technology has always been quite a big part of our theatrical work and was part of our theatrical work before COVID. It's been really interesting over the last 2 years to kind of see the ways in which digital technology has been received differently by the theatre community in kind of live streaming of work, in more of a kind of welcoming in, I guess, of kind of some digital technologies. We work quite a lot with the storytelling tool Twine as well, and that's been kind of really embraced by a lot of theatre makers and made its way into quite a lot of theatrical work.
And the last show we did was a phone call. So it was an interactive phone call to the moon. And we used some software where basically you'd sort of like, we tell a story and it was interactive by pressing numbers on your phone. So yeah, that's sort of been our bread and butter the last couple of years.
And I think that kind of in the space that we are now and kind of looking forwards, there's a real opportunity to continue that dialogue between tech and theatre, which has always been central in our practice, but we see there's quite a lot of space and quite a lot of interest in the possibility and capacity for tech and theatre in interactive phone calls, in virtual reality, in kind of interactive narratives and stuff as well. So I think that there's a lot of space for that, both practically in terms of navigating the constraints of COVID, but also creatively. There's a lot of really exciting experiences that could be made in stories.
And theatres have spent 2 years building digital audiences now, so there's an appetite to sustain that.
Well, that's fantastic. I see a lot of enthusiasm in the chat about the phone call to the moon, and myself, I found that that's fantastic. Okay, thank you very much for your answer. And also, just well, cheating, a second question for you, but it's very quick. Someone's asking when and where will be the theatre show?
We're in R&D at the moment, so probably in 2 years' time we'll let you know.
But follow us online, and then that's the best way to find out when it will be. So we'll let you know.
Yeah. And all the social media links are on our Twitter, so don't hesitate to go see there. And now I have, for the last question, it's a question for Rick. I think it's an adorable question. Someone is asking, how can you make a tiny cake without it being mistaken for a regular size cupcake?
Oh, I like the question. Yeah, I mean, like coming back to the scale reference, and I would look at like stuff you would usually find in the kitchen and which maybe could be like interesting, like at a small scale. Maybe I would even like, I mean, you could also just like have like little character, like wearing like a button shirt like next to the cake, maybe like lunging in the cake or something like that. Or yeah, I don't know, you can like really play with that. I think it's quite interesting if you also take like the scale reference and like do something with the scene. Obviously, you could also just put like a penny there, but it would be kind of boring. Unless it's like a penny, maybe with like some arms, legs, and a face, then could be cool. But yeah, lots of ways to approach this, I would say.
Well, thanks for the reply, and hopefully we'll have some great tiny cakes out with the hashtag Arcadia Night 2021.
Please do. We'd love that. We'd love that. So I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this Q&A, the final Q&A. So I would like to thank our guests here. You've been wonderful. Thank you so much. And Gino, would love to have you back. We're going to wrap up the evening. Take care, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Take care.